Hey, everybody, this is Phil from Integrity Inspired Solutions, and you are listening to the Agile Bites podcast. It's a show where we break down lean and agile concepts to give agile leaders the tools that you need to make practices work, get buy-in, and be empowered in your roles to take your organizations forward into greater agility. So hello, Agilicateers. Today we are going to be talking about daily stand-ups or the daily Scrum if you're one of our Scrum brothers or sisters. But before we get into that, I have to talk about something that's a little disturbing because I know what you've been doing. I know that you've tried to hide it. I know you hoped I wouldn't talk about it on the podcast, but I'm going to talk about it on the podcast because I know that you have been having daily stand-ups where you have been going around the circle and asking people what they did yesterday, what they're going to do today, and if they have any roadblocks. Don't try to deny it, please. Don't make this any harder than it has to be. I know you've been doing it, but today we're going to stop. And I want you to take a moment, wherever you're at right now, if you're in your car, if you're at work, especially if you're in some kind of crowded location like an airport, and I want you to say aloud with me, from this day forward, I will no longer do a daily stand-up where I ask people, what did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? And do you have any roadblocks? When I was first learning Scrum long time ago, they taught me in my actual Scrum training that that was how you did a daily stand-up, was you asked those 3 questions in specific. And I think that as the industry has grown, as more people are getting certified, as you have people who are teaching Scrum or other kinds of lean or agile frameworks and methodologies out there, this is a bit of apocryphal, quote unquote, wisdom that has just kind of been passed around and passed down from class to class, practitioner to practitioner, instructor to instructor. Even people who barely have a point of contact for Scrum will probably have heard of the daily stand-up and will probably run them in a very similar way, asking those 3 questions. And that's the way I did it for a long time too. But I began to notice something about that. First of all, it really put the focus on the specific individual. And when that happens, when you're basically going around interviewing each person about their work, it gives a particular dynamic to the stand-up. Now, all of a sudden, people are having to sort of justify their existence, right? They have to sound like they really accomplished something. And so it's almost like a little status report with each individual. And the irony of this is that everybody knows the daily stand-up is not supposed to be a status report. And that's what's kind of funny about it is people will say, let's make sure this isn't a status report. Okay, now I'm going to go around the circle and everybody tell me what you did yesterday. That's a status report, right? Whether you want it to be one or not. And what I discovered was a lot of times the things that people were saying, they may have sounded busy, but a lot of times they would say things that really didn't have any bearing on anybody else. They didn't impact anybody else. And so people would just kind of stand in the circle and just kind of wait for their opportunity to talk. Well, when this is what your daily stand-ups are like, obviously this doesn't help anyone. This doesn't have a lot of value to anybody who's actually participating in the stand-up because I don't need to hear what another developer is doing if it has nothing to do with me. And so it's just kind of a waste of people's time. And inevitably, just like other Scrum events or things that you're doing with your own Agile team that people perceive don't have value to them, they're just going to quit doing it, right? They're just going to quit showing up. We had one guy who always missed the stand-up. And I talked to him about it, and he said it was because of traffic. So we moved the stand-up 15 minutes to match when he got into the office. And then all of a sudden, traffic took an extra 15 minutes after that. He just didn't want to go. He just didn't want to go to the stand-up, and he didn't want to tell me that it was a waste of his time. But it was a waste of everyone's time, really. So that's what I want to talk about today. That format of stand-up is very individual focused, and it focuses on individuals being busy. And no matter how you try to slice and dice it, it just ends up with people sharing things that don't have a lot of impact to everyone else. And it does end up being kind of a status report, no matter what your best efforts are. So I want to talk about the daily Scrum, if you're a Scrum folk, or the daily stand-up, if that's just a practice that you've incorporated in your Agile teams. And it's a practice that I incorporate into all of mine. I highly recommend it for any team larger than 2 people. Let's talk for a minute about what you're wanting to get out of a daily Scrum or a daily stand-up. because I think a lot of people are unclear on this. And if people were clearer on it, they would adjust the practice accordingly. What you want to end up with is for your team to have a plan of attack for their work that day as designed by the team in response to whatever the circumstances are on the ground that day. Okay, so that may have sounded like a lot. Let me go over that one more time. What you want at the end of your stand-up is you want the team's plan of attack for work that day that they've designed themselves as a team, not as a bunch of individuals, and it's in response to what your current circumstances are. What's currently going on? What are the obstacles that have come up? What are the problems people have run into? What things have changed in the landscape? And you do this every day because you don't want more than 24 hours to go by without the team adjusting to changes, without the team being able to adjust to these changing circumstances. So that's what you want. The daily stand-up and the daily scrum is not so that it sounds like everyone's staying busy. Technically, it's not even to help people out who have roadblocks necessarily, although that could be part of it. It's really so that the team is able to plan their work for the day, and they do it together as a team, and they take into account anything that's going on that might influence their plan. Some days that plan may be, let's just all do what we were doing yesterday. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. Nothing has really changed. Nothing has come up. We still have the things to work on that we did yesterday, so let's just do it. That's 100% fine. But what we're really after is the team coming to that conclusion together. Now, as we're trying to get at that, what I'm going to call the deliverable, right? The plan, the team's plan for work that day, there's a few different things that we might take a look at to help us arrive at the best plan. And this is where there's a little bit of a fork in the road, because if you're a Scrum team, you have a consideration that literally everyone else does not have. So I want to start with you. Okay? If you are a Scrum team and you're doing your daily Scrum, the main question for you is, are we going to achieve the sprint goal? If you don't have a sprint goal, then I would probably offer that you don't need to be doing Scrum. You should be picking Scrum because it fits your specific circumstances. And if it does fit your specific circumstances, then every sprint needs to have a goal. And at your daily stand-up, your team should always be looking at, are we on track to achieve the sprint goal? Did anything happen to put it in jeopardy? Are we doing work that's going to put the sprint goal at risk? Are we prioritizing work that's going to achieve the sprint goal? Those are the things that you want to ask yourself, and the team needs to plan their day's work accordingly. If priorities have changed and the sprint goal is invalid, if it doesn't look like you're going to get your sprint backlog done that you selected for that sprint goal, those things and more, of course, roadblocks that people run into, blocked items, all these are things that could potentially put your sprint goal at risk. And the daily stand-up is your chance to adjust to that. So the team looks at the sprint goal, they look at how work is going, and as a team, they figure out, hey, what do we need to do to make sure that we're still on track to achieve the sprint goal? Most days, there probably isn't anything particularly out of the ordinary to do. Those stand-ups will probably go pretty quickly. The team will just kind of figure out who's working on what cards, and are we going to keep doing that? Sure, and off you go. But if anything has come up that could potentially put the sprint goal at risk, then you need to deal with it. So for your daily stand-ups, that should be a primary question. Are we still on track to achieve our sprint goal? Has anything come up that might put the sprint goal at risk? And if so, then we need to formulate the day's plan of attack to rectify that. It may mean swarming around a particular card that's in trouble. It may mean telling a manager that you're not going to get around to that report because you really need to focus on the sprint goal and you're not going to meet it if you start taking in extra work. It may mean meeting with your product owner and renegotiating the sprint backlog. But whatever it is, that's going to be your primary question. And I would argue that if you're a Scrum team, there is no question more important than that. I realize that may not be a popular opinion. I do know that there's kind of a movement right now to try to make Scrum teams more into flow-based teams. And there's some circumstances where that works and there's some circumstances where it doesn't. But Scrum's whole unique reason for existence depends on those sprint goals. And so you really want to have your conversation primarily oriented around the sprint goals. Okay, so that's you guys. Now I want to talk to literally everyone else on the planet, which are the people who maybe are not doing Scrum or maybe doing bits and pieces of it or what have you. In your case, the daily stand-up, you're probably not going to have a sprint goal. You're just going to have work. It's just work that's coming out of your backlog that needs to be done. I hope it's been prioritized. I hope we've decided that it's the most valuable thing you could have been doing. But there's not necessarily a sprint goal. There's not a larger overarching thing that you're shooting for that you need to meet by the end of a time box. So in your case, the primary consideration is, do we have any work items that are aging? How old are the things that are currently in progress? Is there anything that's been sitting out here for a longer period of time than we're comfortable with? What are the things we currently have in progress that are still in progress and have been for some time? You really want to orient your conversation on, out of the things we're doing right now, how much of it has just been sitting there? How much of it is taking a long time? And as a team, what can we do? What can we change to address work items that have been aging a long time? Now, how will you know what items have been aging? Well, depending on if you use any particular tooling or not, a lot of them will display aging on your cards. A lot of tooling now has aging work in progress reports that can be really useful because they can actually show you, hey, this card is hanging out in requirements a lot longer than most of your cards do, or this card has been in testing a lot longer than a lot of your cards have been in testing. And you can talk about that. I highly recommend that if you're using a tool that actually has an aging work in progress report, that you actually use that as part of your stand-up. Pull it up, take a look at the things that are on there, and does it look like things are moving along at a pretty steady pace, or are things getting hung up here and there? So for Scrum teams, are we still on track to meet our sprint goal? For everybody else, do we have anything that's not moving forward? Do we have anything that's taking a long time, aging, just kind of sitting there? And there may be other questions you ask as a result of that, right? Like maybe things are hanging around a long time because an item is blocked, or somebody needs help, or a card ended up being a lot bigger than you thought it was going to be. That's great. Have those discussions, right? But the point is that the team needs to respond, right? The team needs to formulate their plan for the day based around those things. It's very important, whether you're a Scrum Master or an Agile coach, or even just a member of these teams, that you really help the team understand that the work that the team has in progress belongs to the whole team. It doesn't matter if one individual is knocking it out of the park. Is the team delivering work at the rate that we need to be delivering it? And that's the whole team's problem. Everyone has to come together to plan for the day how the team is going to be the best it can be, how it can be the most productive and deliver the most value. That is literally what the daily stand-up is supposed to be about in broad brushstrokes. So hopefully I've convinced you on that, right? The goal of the meeting is to come away with a plan for the day that the whole team has banded together to come up with for the team to work on that day. And it may involve people swarming, helping. It may involve pulling people off of one user story to put them on another user story. But the point is the team has made those decisions together, right? And they figured out how they're going to attack the work as a team. We explore that plan by asking, are we on track to meet our sprint goal if you're a Scrum team? And or do we have items that are aging unnecessarily? If you're a Kanban team or just, doing different Agile things in general. So if you're on board so far, I do have a few suggestions that I think will help. It's not really fair for me to tell you how awful the 3-question style of daily stand-up is and then sort of leave you to figure out, what to do. So let me give you a few suggestions. One is that when you do your daily stand-ups, focus on the work that's in progress. Don't focus on the individuals. This is one of the big weaknesses with the 3 questions, is it's all about the individual's plan, and the individual's productivity. And that's how you end up with stand-ups where people are saying things that don't impact anybody else. If you have a daily stand-up and everyone is saying things that don't have an impact on anyone else in the room, you don't have a team. You don't have the right team, at least. You have a bunch of individuals who sit together, or you have a bunch of individuals working from a common backlog, but you don't have a team. So instead of focusing on individuals, we want to focus on the actual work items, the actual work that is in progress. So one thing that I think is a great start for teams is to pull up those cards, pull up your board if you use a Kanban board or a task board in Scrum. Pull it up and talk about the items that are in progress. So instead of going around to each person, you go around to each user story, or you go around to each task, or whatever your work items look like. And you just ask the team, how are things going with this? Is it going okay? Is it in jeopardy? Do we need to do anything different here? And so you're asking questions about the work items. You're not interviewing each individual about their personal productivity. It's, are these work items moving? And are they moving in the way that we would expect? Another suggestion I have for you is to make aging visible in some form or fashion. If you're using an electronic tool, it probably does this for you. A lot of tools will put the number of days that a card has been in progress on the card. As I said, other tools will have an aging work in progress report that you can use. All of these are valuable things to reference as you're having your daily stand-up. You want your team to be able to clearly see what items are blocked and how long things are taking, because this is all going to factor into the team's plan for the day. They have to know what things are blocked. How long have they been blocked? How long has this thing been in progress? And so making that visible in some form or fashion is going to be really helpful. The last suggestion I have for you is to make sure that you are leading by example, especially when it comes to vulnerability. Because as you're talking about work, especially work that may be in trouble, a lot of times people have to admit that things are not going well. And this may even involve admitting to some personal weakness, like, I got into a task that I thought I could do, but it's too hard for me. Or I thought I could do this by myself, but I really can't. Or I know I said this would take me a day, but I think it's going to take 5. Or even something sad happened to me yesterday and I thought I was going to be productive, but I wasn't. I just sat in my cube and stared at the screen most of the day, and I didn't get as much done as I thought. These are real things that real people go through as they're developing software. And you want to create an environment where it is 100% okay for people to share their vulnerabilities and share their struggles, and nothing bad happens. Instead, the team rallies around them. You know, I'll never forget a stand-up I had one day where we were going around talking about the different work items, and somebody just said, you know, guys, my dog actually died yesterday, and I got to be honest with you, I didn't do anything. I just sat in my cubicle and I didn't type anything. I was just so sad. And the team was like, okay, well, I tell you what, why don't you take today to get your feet under you? We'll divide your tasks up amongst the other team members. We'll just take care of you today. Tomorrow, if you still feel like you can't jump in, maybe we can talk about what that looks like. But today, we're just going to get your back. You know, that's a beautiful thing. That's the kind of thing that you want to happen in your teams, because getting the work done in a timely manner is the team's responsibility. It's not an individual's responsibility. And key to making that happen is that transparency, is that vulnerability. I have to be able to tell you, hey, I thought I could do this and I couldn't for whatever reason. And so I highly encourage you to lead by example. Be the first person to say something bad. Be the first person to fall on your own sword. Make something up, maybe, if you have to. Or, well, maybe don't make something up, but maybe make a bigger deal out of something than it really is. Take something where things did not go your way and just be transparent in front of your team. And when that happens, and when they see that you're doing it, and they see that it's safe, and nothing bad is going to happen, and people are just going to help and support, then they're going to want to do it too. And that's exactly the kind of dynamic you have to have for a team that is really serious about collective ownership of the work and moving the ownership forward. Okay, so I hope this has really helped you out. I hope this changes your stand-ups radically for the better. So just remember, it's a plan that the whole team has to work on together. It's a plan for their day's work, and it's a plan that takes into account all the different good things and bad things that happen throughout the workday that block items or that keep people from moving forward. And it's about your team coming up with a constructive response to that. And if that's your goal, with your daily scrum or your daily stand-up, you're going to be fine. Just make sure that whatever practices you decide to bring in are oriented toward helping your team get to that plan every single day, and you'll get all kinds of crazy value out of this event. Thanks everyone for listening to Agile Bites. Agile does sometimes bite, but we don't think it always has to. If you enjoyed what you heard today, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you happen to be using. And if you can, leave us a comment, because we'd love to hear your feedback. What things would you like to hear about? What things did you hear that were valuable to you today? You can also head over to integrityinspired.com to sign up to our email list. But that's all for today, folks. We'll see you next time.